All right, give it 5 seconds and then you should be live.
Are we ready?
Whenever you're ready, Commissioner Pent.
Okay, this is Commissioner Pant, Vice Chair today, calling the meeting to order of the Scott WMO Water Planning Commission for November 23rd, 2020 at 4 p.m. The first order of business will be to, do we need to call earlier? Do we, as when we do the meeting?
Minutes and agenda.
Okay, all right, so the minutes have been published and sent out. If everyone has had a chance to review them, we're open to any corrections or questions at this time. This is Commissioner Pant again. Brian, just the one typo that you might want to check on. Other than that, I don't have any questions.
We got it. Thank you.
Are there any other additional questions or corrections to the minutes as published? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve as distributed.
Commissioner Veerling, I would second that.
Did we get the motion?
I think. Just a point of order, Commissioner Veerling, we need you to make the motion, please, if you could.
Commissioner Veerling, make a motion to approve the agenda and meeting minutes as stated.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
And this is Commissioner Castillas. I'll second it.
We do a roll call.
And, yep, I'll do a roll. Commissioner Pent,
Aye.
Commissioner Castillas,
Aye.
Commissioner Veerling,
Aye.
and Commissioner Schmidt.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda will be to approve the agenda as distributed. Do we have any questions or corrections or adjustments to the agenda first? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve the agenda as published.
This is Commissioner Castillas. I'll move to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Schmidt, I'll second.
Yes. Vote.
Yep, I'll do a roll. Commissioner Pent,
Aye.
Commissioner Castillas,
Aye.
Commissioner Veerling,
Aye.
and Commissioner Schmidt.
Aye.
Thank you.
Right, next on the agenda will be the staff reports, and can we perhaps go with the Scott first there for this?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Thank you, commissioners. So we have just a few small but rather notable updates for this evening. Joining us for her first staff meeting is Dominique Archibald. She is a part-time Natural Resources and Parks Department Administrative Assistant. So this is backfilling of a previous held position in building, and we were fortunate enough to be able to retain it and move it over to Natural Resources. So while it's not housed out of the SWMO, is a critical piece to our team. Most of you will remember, obviously, Dev, who is no longer able to help us as she needs to go back to building full time. So I just wanted to introduce all of you to Dominique. She's got a wealth of knowledge and experience, a very strong background in administrative assisting, as well as a lot of technical background, and she's just a warm, wonderful person. So welcome, Dominique.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Planning Commission, we welcome you, and we hope that your work with us will be somewhat enjoyable at least.
I believe it will be. Thank you so much.
So you'll be hearing from her a lot. The other piece of updates that I have is on Friday, we did have our most recent convene meeting of the Lower Minnesota River Watershed-Based implementation funding. This is again the major funding we receive from the Board of Water and Soil Resources each year. The group did pass the projects to move forward for the 2020-2021 funding cycle. I'm happy and pleased to say that they did approve moving forward with the SWMO's and SWCD's $275 grant for the tax program. We also actually ended up putting forward a couple of, they're almost like pass-through grants. One of them is a 35,500 grant for the SWCD for the education program. We were a little concerned at the last minute, actually on Friday, Bowser reached out to me and said they weren't sure education opportunities where you reach out to children are eligible. Their concern is that children can't actually do anything to improve water quality. So I will say that's a little bit of a blind side. Clearly don't agree. But we will be working with Bowser to mediate that and get the project approved and move forward. So that was a bit of a surprise and shock. We do believe it is eligible. We do believe it meets Bowser's requirements. So that's the only surprise with that one. The other one is about a 54,000 pass-through grant to Prior Lake, Spring Lake, so that they can do a study for Campbell Lake and Upper Pekin Creek. And that'll be really important because what they would like to move forward with is doing some regional bonding to lead into development rather than doing it after development tries to come in. So we're really supportive of that one as well. So that was on Friday. The other piece of good news we have is that we were able to work with our partners, and the county was able to come through for us with a match for the Mcmahon Lake Outlet Project, which is a significant portion of the match. As you know, the WPC was able to, the WMO was able to find about $100,000 in our budget, but we were still a couple $100,000 short. So the county's been able to guarantee that they can move forward with the other $100,000, as well as a couple of the other important pieces, providing us an option for maintenance of the drainage way and a couple other things. So there's still more things to work through, but we've made a notable progress forward over the last couple of weeks since we last met. So those are my two major updates for this month, and I would stand for any questions. Or Dominique too, if you have a question for her.
If not, thank you again for all the good news and good updates. If there are no further questions, we can maybe move on. Have we heard from whether or not we'll have a report from the SWC?
Unfortunately, I have not heard at this time. However, as always, Trump put together a very comprehensive packet item and really details the activities of the SWCD. So I would just invite the commissioners to reach out to Troy if you have any questions regarding the packet materials.
Are we going to go through any of the other materials, or are we going to move on at this point? Any questions?
I can entertain any questions you might have. Otherwise, I recommend just moving on at the time.
Okay, we'll carry our questions forward then to the next meeting when Troy is present.
Yeah.
So moving on then to the ongoing business. First, we have project updates by Ryan.
Dear Commissioners, thank you. Couple of updates. So one, we have
Maybe.
EPA.
Ryan is tied up. Maybe we can move that to updates by Melissa. Ryan. Oh, here comes Ryan.
I apologize, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I had myself still on mute, so thank you. Project updates, couple of them for you. One, we continue to work with our public works staff on fixing a couple of our CIPs where we've got some ongoing maintenance. So we have 2 sites still left to go. And we were hoping to connect before our kind of latest snowfall, but that tied up the public works staff for a little while. So we'll hopefully be able to circle back with them soon and get out to the sites and assess them and see if they're able to actually make some of the corrections. We also, on our phase 1 CIP site, as part of that project, we installed tree protection around all the trees and shrubs that we installed. So some of them were smaller tubing, other of them were larger cages, depending on the size of the trees. And that is going to take place on Wednesday, the removal of those. So they've been there for 3 years now plus, and we will hopefully have them all removed on Wednesday. If not, we'll work with the subcontractor to have them removed there shortly after. I don't know if they'll have enough time because one of the sites is a little bit off the beaten path, and it takes some effort to kind of get to and from it, that it might prove to take them a little bit longer than they might anticipate. So, but either way, we should be able to have those wrapped up, if not this week, by next week. And that should kind of wrap up the stream bank CIPs. So the other sites, we actually kind of learned the tree protections that in some instances were hindering the plants, and during a flood event actually caused a little bit of damage. So we actually took them off on some of the future projects. So this is the only one that still has the protections on them. We are working with PCA staff on an amendment for our current EPA grant. It would shift the remaining funds that we had as part of our CIP balance over to BMP projects. So we wanted to still keep it in the implementation section. We would just use those funds, you know, in pretty minimal at roughly $3,400. But nonetheless, when we have projects on the waiting list, every dollar counts. So we want to use it all up. And we also are requesting to move over some of the technical assistance funds that are no longer needed in at the Rice SWCD and move those over to the Scott SWCD. And that's between $8,000 and $9,000 for that move. So PCA has reached out about this proposal, and they seem amenable to it. So we're just kind of waiting to make sure we won't have to shift anything else over before kind of finalizing. The less amount of these minor amendments, the better. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Commissioners, any questions for Ryan on the project updates? Thank you, Ryan. Very good updates. Moving on then to Melissa, can you give us updates on yours?
Sure. I just wanted to note too, we have another person that just called in, and I was getting some feedback from them. And then Virgil, you must have a really good microphone on yours, because I'm hearing a lot of feedback on yours. If maybe everybody could mute.
All right, I'll try time.
Okay. Okay, I just have 2 updates for you. The first is the Mcmahon Outlet Project update, and as Vanessa said, we can go into the holidays a little bit more relaxed because we now have all the match that we need for that grant. So we will be proceeding with an agreement probably sometime with the state, probably sometime in January, whenever they send it to us, with any additional requirements such as a more formal timeline of tasks to be completed for that project. We'll also be proceeding with discussions with the county, with townships, with Cedar Lake and Spring Lake Township, and a landowner on any easements, road right-of-way, help with maintenance of the drainage channel or the outlet itself, and probably get some agreements in place with that. Other work projected for 2021 would be starting the environmental assessment worksheet, putting together a request for proposals for the actual outlet design, communicating with the DNR on any permit requirements, So our draft anticipated timeline is getting all those tasks completed leading up to the actual construction. And then we anticipate construction in 2022. Now, we do have the option to request an extension if needed. So we'll know a little bit more probably by closer to the end of 2021 if we're going to need to apply for an extension. I know of two landowners for sure on Mcmahon Lake that are leading the steps for the establishment of a lake improvement district. And that would be kind of a funding source for any future maintenance of the outlet. So that's what I have an update for that. Is there any questions on that before I move forward?
Any questions for Melissa?
Okay, I don't hear any, so I'll move on to my last update, which is for the 2019 Watershed-Based funding grant. I did submit an amendment to Bowser. They asked for additional information. I finished putting all that together for them last week. I'll kind of explain what this amendment was all about here. There was a special practices activity in the grant that Paul had created in the original work plan for the grant. And that activity included implementing practices that address impacts associated with development. Its original purpose was to target practices that abate non-point source pollution associated with chlorides from de-icing, practices and phosphorus and sediment reduction from impervious surfaces. One of the practices mentioned in there also was well decommissions, because that particular activity was kind of meant as a placeholder to be used for either projects or programs that were in the grant that we were completing but needed more information before we could decide how to use that special practices money. So now the final request to Bowser of shifting that grant funds around with the additional information that we've learned so far from like the smart salting trainings, chloride monitoring that SWCD did in 2019, the City of Prior Lakes drinking water source management area abandoned well assessment, which was part of the grant, and then some additional assessments we've determined to move the money around this way. And I can see, Ryan, can you share that spreadsheet that I sent you?
Mr. Chair, Melissa, yes. Just give me 1 second to pull it up here. And then let me know, can you see that?
Don't see anything yet.
Okay. Let me stop sharing, and then because I pulled up a new document, it might just be, I need to share that particular spreadsheet. All right, how about now? Can you see that?
Yep, I can see it. So I tried to make this as comprehensible as possible, but it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of pots getting moved around here. So this abandoned well assessment, we used a lot less money than we thought we were going to need for it. So there was $7,900 left. So we're moving that to technical assistance for the SWCD. There was a category or activity for chloride and bacteria education and outreach, and we originally had $35,000 in that, but we only have 1 year left of the grant, so we thought we would move $10,000 of that to that special practices category. There was a activity on chlorides assessment, and that was where we did all those smart salting workshops. We also, out of that, had Fortin Consulting develop a winter maintenance tools guide from people who actually use the tools, like facilities and public works, so that people can see what other people are using to reduce their salt use. So that guide will be helpful in other types of organizations being able to access that and see what kind of tools people are using. So there was 14,452 left over in that. We're moving that to the chloride reduction equipment activity. Now, we created that activity when we gave the city of Savage $15,000 for that new chloride equipment. I don't know if you remember that or not, but that was last year. So they bought this new, they use it towards a new truck to really reduce their salt input out on the roads. So then with that category, we can offer the $14,000 to different nonprofit organizations to use specifically for like being able to try out brines. So it has to be something that's directly, it has to be a tool or equipment that's directly related to actually reducing salt use. It can't be like a mechanical tool like shovels or scrapers or anything like that. So the special practices category, then that brings that up to 35,500. And again, that activity, Bouncer is requiring us to create other activities or put that money in other existing activities. So we're going to move 3,500 to the tax program specifically for well decommissions. We will prioritize well decommissions that need to be sealed in drinking water source management areas, but it will be available for any well decommissions if we don't have any of those that come to our attention. And that'll pay for about 3 well decommissions is what we'll pay for. So then that leaves a balance of 32,000 in that special practices category, which we're creating a new activity called urban BMPs. And that will specifically address non-point source pollution from impervious surfaces, reducing total phosphorus and reducing sediment. So you kind of can see down here at the bottom, the well assessment category is now at 0, chlorides assessments at 0, special practices is at 0, and we have a new activity for 32,000. We have money going into for chloride reduction equipment, and then a new total for just chlorides and bacteria education and outreach of 25,000. And this grant does expire at the end of next year. So that's all I have on that. Do you have any questions?
Commissioners, any questions for Melissa? Then again, thanks, Melissa, for a very nice update, and I appreciate the spreadsheet here also. It helps us, get a handle on the numbers. So thank you. Okay, if there's no other updates for either Ryan or Melissa, we'll move on to new business. And the first item on the agenda for new business is the tax docket update. And Ryan, I think you're going to head that one off.
Chair, Commissioners, yes, I will. I'll lead this. First thing, before I start sharing my screen, I was just going to see who we have as another call-in. So whoever was the last person to call in, could you just let us know who you are, and then I'll make sure to put your name associated with your login. I've got Joe Thill and Tom Wolf came in, but then it looks like there was a third person. Is it Bruce Looney?
It is possible, Ryan, that it could have been Kate. She popped in and out for a couple of times, and she will sometimes call in with audio as her best option, but it might linger.
Okay.
So we appreciate your patience, Commissioners. We did learn at the last meeting that Ryan does in fact have to do everything from his computer, because if he is not the host, it doesn't record what's actually going on at the meeting. So unfortunately, Ryan does have to do a little bit more troubleshooting for a short period of time. So yep, that was Kate there as call-in user 3. So thank you. And apologize, Commissioners, for the interruption. and you are welcome to move forward.
Okay. Chair, Commissioners, thank you. So, wanted to give a little bit of background on the docket first. So let me get it to where we've got it at full screen, and then we'll go all the way to where it's located here. So, just to give a little bit of background, our docket is the policies and procedure documentation that we use for our cost share program. So we just, because it's, the name is quite long, we just commonly refer to it as a docket. And this has been in place since 2006, and every year we update it, and that's meant to adapt and make changes to it to better fit our goals and needs, and then also the residents of Scott County. So we usually take the information we've learned over the past year and then try to apply it in making the program better suited to various practices or any challenges that we encountered that we want to clean up, or also there could be just clarifications that that we needed to make sure it was very clear in the docket as to what we were trying to achieve with something. And then also the review process. So this is towards the tail end of the docket revisions. Where it starts is a couple months ago, staff at the Soil and Water Office will sit down, and we're involved with that as well. We keep a log all year of proposed changes. So for 2021, we've already started. If there'll be any changes, come January, we'll start documenting those to make sure we keep a running record. That way we don't forget them, at the tail end of the year when we're actually making the revisions. So staff starts with the changes. They're the ones that are maybe the most heavily involved with each of these practices, and so it's good to get their input as to what they're experiencing out in the field and how we can better kind of tailor it to a changing market or just any changes that they feel as though are appropriate. Then what we'll do is we have a subcommittee which is comprised of members of the WPC. So we had Virgil and Rita that served as our WPC members at this subcommittee. And then also there are members of the Soil and Water Board that participated, and then staff and or administrators for all the other watershed districts or watershed management organizations in Scott County. So we had this year Project like Spring Lake, Lower, Min, and Vermilion that also participate, because this docket is now a countywide docket. So, and that was a more recent change where we switched it over to, instead of having a different docket for each watershed district or WMO, we thought that we're mostly applying the same practices. Rates and stuff might be different, but for the most part, we're trying to achieve a lot of the same things with this, that we could combine it to just one document to better serve the residents, because they might not always see the difference between living in, let's say, like Spring Lake Watershed District versus the WMOs. And so we thought that that was an easy way to kind of help residents, that this is a one spot that they can all universally look at if they wanted to look up our various practices. So with that being said, that's kind of to give some background as to the docket, why we're here today. And so after that subcommittee meets, we make these changes, and then we bring them to the larger group with the WPC.
No.
And depending on what changes come out from today, whether it's approved or not, that kind of dictates the next step. If it is approved, recommended for approval, then it does go on to the WMO board, which Scott County Board and WMO board are one and the same, for final approval. And then if approved, then we would have those changes ready for January 1st if it goes to the December board meeting and is approved. If there are changes to it, then what we have done in the past is, depending on what level those changes are, if the WPC wants it to come back to a future meeting, we would be happy to bring it back and discuss those changes, and you can see the actual details of the change we made. Otherwise, we've also done it where if there's maybe more minor changes, we can potentially still keep it moving forward with the understanding that we'll make those changes. So, with that being said, I guess I'll first start with, is there any questions about kind of the background or, why we're here today looking at it? Okay, hearing none, I'll move forward with it. So, we did have just a slight discussion right before the meeting that I'll probably go through this in not super fine detail. So to spare everybody's time, I won't go through the grammatical or clarification changes, more substantive changes that maybe they're kind of start a discussion on them, or maybe there's some questions. So you'll notice some of them I do just pass by, but feel free to stop me at any point if you want me to discuss anything that maybe we're going past or that you just want to talk about further. So, first change, and you can see we've got the changes in strike through and underline, and then there's also some comments on the side as well. So, one of the fairly bigger changes was cost share for projects deemed eligible could be provided at the same rate as the original contract if the repair is completed within 3 years of the original certification date. What that means is that if there is a repair that's needed, and we also define what is an eligible repair or not. So if it was lack of maintenance, that wouldn't be eligible for cost share. That's part of the operation and maintenance policy that each landowner signs when they sign up for cost share for a project. But if it is an eligible repair, because we do change the rates, if you recall, some of you know that we've been kind of trying to bring the rates down a bit through the years. So that we felt as though it was kind of fair to the landowner to be able to still have them sign up at the same rate as long as it's within 3 years. And if it's past 3 years, then it would be the current rate that they would sign up for. And I'll just kind of briefly stop for a second between each one, and if there's anything, feel free to chime in. And if I don't hear anything, I'll just keep going because there's probably a moderate amount of changes here, so it will take a little bit of time. Next one was whenever applicable or possible, we would try to use biodegradable netting as part of our projects, and that's just from the business of we're in conservation, and it feels very appropriate to try to use biodegradable materials whenever we can, as long as the cost is somewhat in line. Then at the bottom here, this is another big change. So we are proposing that filter strips and conservation cover, which is our native grass practice, are eligible for a one-time renewal. So they could potentially one time after it's expired re-enroll it for an additional 10 years. So some of the kind of finer details of that they have to do it within 1 year of the original contract expiration date, so they can't come back after the fact of maybe several years and then want to re-enroll. So there is kind of that timeline that they have to do it by. We have to have available funding, and also the practice can be offered at a lower rate than what we're offering for a new project going in, and that's meant to try to not tie up too much of our budget with this program into renewals. in our comp plan, we do define it as to kind of have sustainability with the program, but the emphasis is more on new projects and trying to change behavior than sustaining and renewing projects. Now, with that being said, we felt as though there could be instances where projects come up for renewal that might have a really high public benefit, and we felt as though there could be the potential to offer those landowners the renewal opportunity. So we can also tailor the budget slightly like we did this year. We kind of cut up the budget for the overall program into different categories. So, for instance, we could essentially set aside, a set dollar amount that for renewals, this much could go towards them versus then new projects would have the much larger budget amount that would be available. So, there's a couple of different ways that we're hoping to reduce costs associated with the renewals, just to put more of an emphasis on new projects. That one's kind of a big one, so I guess I'll wait here for a second if anybody has any questions. Okay, I'll keep moving. That's more just a non-substantive change there. Once again, more of a non-substantive change. This is just updating the staff credentials of the SWCD. This is just updating. In practice, we've had these as all ordinances or statutes that we still follow, but we wanted to be very specific in including them. So once again, more of a clarification. This is a new addition that came up, and so with cost share, the applicants are expected to become compliant with all the various, we just passed them, ordinances that we have, and so, or statutes. And that's where we specifically outline them on the previous page. But in some instances, that might not be practical. And one example would be, let's say somebody built a house closer than what our current setback is. And, we have it as they're supposed to be in compliance with that bluff standard. However, it is impractical to actually move the house to meet the standard. So we added a little bit of leeway here to where, in some instances, if it's kind of out of their control or it's just way too expensive, then they could potentially apply for a waiver from it. No changes to the tiered system. Bioretention basins, we just kind of had set numbers associated with the prices for them. Conservation cover, so we wanted to make sure we added that pollinator habitat too was an important piece of this program, so we added that language in there. We also, then on bullet item number 1 down below, we weren't consistent with our cropping history between filterships and conservation cover, and so we wanted to be consistent between the two because it makes sense to have them the same. So that's basically just saying the cropping history has to meet the criteria of row crop or pasture or grasses 4 of the past 6 years. So, and that'll be consistent with the filtership practice as well. There is the ability for a variance from the cropping history. There could be circumstances such as a tile line could have been being fixed over that 6-year period where maybe it wasn't farmed but otherwise normally is. So we wanted to make sure there is some ability there to that it's not a hard set for the past 6 years. In instances where maybe there was some sort of special circumstance that happened during that time period that didn't allow it to meet that criteria. So next one is heavy emphasis on then a spring or summer planting that the mowing is being completed in accordance with their operation and maintenance schedule before their first payment is being made. And that's really just to kind of protect us, to make sure the landowners are essentially doing what they've agreed to in their operation and maintenance plan, and that that the payment could be withheld if it's not being done. And the rest of it is all kind of clarification. This is stating that maintenance. So if if the landowner wants to apply for a prescribed burn, they would have to do so in years 4 or 5 of their contract. So that way, if somebody wanted to do a burn in year 3, probably too soon for a native planting. And so we want to really try to stick to it's really referred to as a mid-contract management, and so we're trying to keep it midway through that contract. And so we just wanted to make sure that that was clear in there. Last one just refers to item number 20 there for conservation coverage. Just refers to the re-enrollment process, which we've got that outlined a little bit further down in this that we'll go over. Cover crops. So the change here in cover crops is item 3. That is giving some flexibility. So if you sign up for a 3-year contract for cover crops, that right now currently we have it where the landowner or producer has to plant that cover crop 3 consecutive years. And we realize that that's the benefit of cover crops, is having consecutive years planted. However, that can lead to being a barrier sometimes for landowners, and so we thought that we'd offer a little bit of flexibility to allow the landowners, if they sign up for a 3-year cover crop practice, that they have to do it in 3 out of 5 years of consecutive years. So, however, this goes with all practices. We have a statement early on in the docket that if a grant requires something different and our funding is dependent on that, then the landowners have to meet grant standards. So, for instance, if the grant said the cover crop has to be planted in 3 consecutive years, then that is what we would require as well, because we are using the grant funds to fund the project. This is more for if there isn't that requirement, or we're using our local funds. So then also we had a clarification here on that if a landowner is doing the maximum amount of the multi-year incentive, which comes to a total of 12,000, that they could potentially move that acreage to another field, assuming that they go through the process of getting it approved through their WCD, as long as they still meet their 100 acres, or whatever they have in their contract. So if for whatever reason it would have to get moved to another field in a given year, then the landowner has to get that prior approved and also still match the same acres. So they can't go less. In theory, they could go more, but they just wouldn't receive the additional payment as per the contract that they have signed. And then the last one, I'm trying to think. Oh, that gets into the clarification too of if it's a multi-year contract and the grant stipulates that it has to be consecutive. Sorry, some of these I don't, we've gone through this docket quite a bit, but I don't have it necessarily every single one of these memorized. So let me see here. This is the filtership practice, and this is basically just saying the same thing about re-enrollment, which we'll get into here in a second. Same thing as conservation cover, though, we're matching the two together. No-till we're strip till. Now this is a big one because this is a new practice, and it was brought up because with cover crops, we're finding that there's a pretty good amount of benefit to them, both from a soil health standpoint, but also from an environmental benefit standpoint of sediment and phosphorus and runoff reductions. Well, no-till or strip till is, along those lines a little bit, that you're getting larger amounts of a field where if no tillage is going on in the fall and into spring, it better protects that field from wind and water erosion. So we are proposing a new practice. It would be for a maximum of 2 years. The rate is $30 per acre, and the maximum acreage is 50 acres. Now, Rita was at the subcommittee meeting, and I know she's not here today, but one of the things she tasked us with was, how do we know if those numbers are appropriate? Could we look at other agencies to see what they're doing and to see if the numbers kind of make sense, be in line with those? So, if bear with me for a second, I was able to do some research with the help of our partners at Soil and Water Office and NRCS, and we actually came up with some numbers here, and I will share them with you. Bear with me for 1 second. All right. Can everybody see this? The rates? Okay, let me move this out of the way.
Yeah, looks good.
All right, I just want to make sure before we get into it. So our friends over at, all three actually, Scott Rice and the Sewer SWCD helped me put this together. And then they got me in touch with an NRCS rep because you'll notice that a lot of the SWCDs are referencing EQIP rates, which is a federal program that NRCS helps administer. Excuse me. So Dodge SWCD is using the fiscal year 20 EQIP rate, maximum 50 acres, and max duration of 3 years. Yellow Medicine SWCD doing the current EQIP rate, so that would mean that if the grant that they had was going over multiple years, they're just going to follow the EQIP rate as that changes. Maximum amount 7,500 per contract, duration 3 or 5 years. Lac Parley, I hope I'm saying that right.
Lacaparo.
Lacaparo, there we go. Thank you, Herschel. That rate is $16.55 per acre per year. That was the EQIP rate in 2019. Similar to Yellow Medicine, 7,500 per contract or 80 acres. And same thing with the duration, 3 or 5 years. So now a lot of these are referencing NRCS. These are the current NRCS rates. So it's $17.72 per acre for most producers out there. However, it is a higher rate for what's deemed to be a historically underserved farmer. So that category is less so than the category where you get the lower rate of the $17.72. So for a lot of it, it would be that more the $17. And then you can use herbicide, but no cover crops. And that's important because then there's another rate down below that does allow some cover crops, and that's what actually they're seeing more people using. Max for that is $15,000 per contract, and you can go 1 to 3 years. NRCS also has what's called trial acres, where you're comparing different farming practices. So this one's a little different. It looks like it was a flat rate of $1,800 with a maximum of 50 acres. The duration, when I was working with the NRCS rep, it kind of sounded like it was more in line with the first one, but for the instance of time, we kind of agreed that he wasn't going to look it up. So if you do the maximum rate on that, that comes out to be, the maximum acres, that comes out to be $36 per acre per year for that one. And that's just basically one field where you would do different trials. You could do conventional tillage or potentially no-till, and then compare that to if you wanted to do cover crops too. So you can compare all three of them in the same field, and then see how the field, the crop reacts to it. They haven't had much luck with that one, so. And then the last one is similar to the third item. Once again, it's conversion of conventional farming to no-till, and that's $10.80, or the higher rate for the historically underserved farmers of $18.36. And you can use herbicide and with cover crops. So this one is actually more of the practice that NRCS is seeing folks use with the cover crop. So they're finding that a lot of people, when they're doing this conversion, are doing it with cover crops as well. So as I'm going back to the original docket changes, if anybody has any questions, just let me know. Okay. So hearing none, I will continue. So we might be, I guess, when looking at the Nrcs rates, we are a little bit higher than what they're offering. Our maximums, though, are a little bit lower. They have a contract maximum of $15,000 for a couple of those. So, and two, it's new. I don't feel as though this is, overly high. I think too, if we want to get this jump started, this seems like a good rate to start with. With a lot of the new practices, we might not have a lot of interest to start. And so in 2021, we'll be able to better gauge as maybe landowners come in the door, is this too high or too low, for us here in Scott County. So I kind of think of it as this year we're going to be able to better hone in that number. But also, I want to make sure that we're all comfortable with it, or if there's any questions about it, that we can address them now.
Ryan, this is Virgil. Yeah, as part of the committee that went through this, I would support the $30 an acre for this first year, with, again, the chance to review it at the end of the year to see how many farmers we had take advantage of it, what our cost is, and whether or not we feel we need to change it in future years. But for the first year, I think we need to jumpstart this program, so I like that rate.
Mr. Chair, thank you. We'll certainly do that. We'll gauge with all the new practices when we start it. There's a heavy emphasis on kind of gauging where they're at in that first year and make the appropriate changes in the following year. All right, we'll continue on. So nutrient management. This is basically, once again, it's similar to cover crops. It's allowing for the implementation of a multi-year contract. Instead of being 3 consecutive years, you can do 3 out of 5 years. And then also, it's basically saying if the applicant is also the applicator, so if the producer has the equipment to do the application themselves versus hiring a third party to do it for them, it basically states what is the materials that they have to turn in for reimbursement. And then it's also stating that's a maximum of 3 years for any given field. Yeah, so if you did, what that's saying is that if you did the 1-year contract for 3 years in a row on the same field, that you can't then all of a sudden sign up for a 3-year contract after that. That no matter whether you're doing single year or multi-year, your max is 3 years on the field. All right, we're getting down there. Prescribed burn basically says that, that you need to have somebody that's a qualified vendor, essentially they're licensed and insured to perform a burn that is receiving cost share. So that way it eliminates a landowner who feels, comfortable doing it themselves, and if, the burn got away from them or caused any sort of damage. So if somebody wants to do that on their own, they're welcome to do that as part of their mid-contract management. But if they're applying for cost share, they need somebody who is, an actual vendor doing the work for them. That one's just clarification. We had it duplicated in there. It's again just that was a grammatical item. Well decommissioned. So, back up so you can kind of see. So here, well decommissions is the tail end of this page, and that's just the sealing of an unused well. And so why that's important is that unused well potentially becomes a conduit for contaminants to get down into the water supply if they are just left open. So this offers cost share for the actual sealing of those. Now, much is the case for a lot of other practices. If a landowner is required to install the practice, that we don't feel as though it's appropriate to offer, the financial assistance for it in most cases. This practice in particular has most of the well sealings are actually required through transfer of property is a real common one, or you're having a new well installed and you've got another well on the property, then you're required to seal it in that instance too. So the language we inserted in here is basically that if it is required, that it wouldn't be eligible for cost share, and that the applicant is required to sign an affidavit stating that they are not required to decommission that well. Last one here, the wetlands. Basically, we just are referencing our conservation cover practice. It was a little unclear as to the buffers that are established, so a lot of times our wetlands, the landowners, they're required to do a buffer around it, and it's a 30-foot minimum. But a lot of times they'll square off a field or increase that buffer a little further out. And so we're referencing our conservation cover practice, which is our native grass practice for that. Versus in the past, they could do filter strip and conservation cover, and it just makes sense to leave it as conservation cover. All right, we're almost to the end here. So now, because each watershed district or WMO has their own priorities, and they might not always align, there's a section here, the Appendix A, is designated for each of those authorities to establish their own rules. And so, one of ours is that if the applicant or the project exceeds $20,000, that needs to be recorded on their deed. If some of you might remember that from years past, that would be specific to the WMO. Also, our approval authorities and what dollar amounts those are specific to the WMO as well. So all those reside here. What we wanted to include is this year we installed the ranking and batching of applications, and we want to be transparent as to how the projects are ranked and scored amongst each other in the instances of where we don't have enough funds to cover all the projects. And so we put all of those in here, and they're based off of our priorities in our comp plan, what we have an emphasis for, and so we just want to be transparent with the landowners that if there's a question as to maybe why a project was ranked higher or lower than another one, and it's going off of this, so they can see that exact criteria. And then also here is the re-enrollment that we touched on for filter strips and conservation cover. And I'll just read it so you can see exactly what it says. It's that they'll be considered on a case-by-case basis that are determined by the SWMO to provide a substantial public benefit, and the practice is not eligible for any other funding source. So if there's another opportunity that the practice could be funded through another funding source, then we would steer the applicant in that direction. And then also, it just goes to show, this is really case by case. Not all of these are going to rise to the level of a high enough public benefit that we would want to necessarily re-enroll them. So that's, the heavy emphasis here is that there has to be a substantial public benefit to re-enroll the project for another 10 years. Last item here, so this is for Prior Lake, Spring Lake, so it doesn't apply to us. This is our flow chart, so it shows our decision process. This just got updated after the packet went out, and so the only changes, the formatting is going to look different. That Troy found a good program to use to make this a little bit easier to read. So one change would be our administrative approval is higher than 50,000. It's 100,000 now. So that one we'll make that change on there as well. And then also the WPC in July approved staff making approval decisions in the absence of a WPC meeting. So we'll add that to the flow chart as well. Nothing else will change though on there. So we just wanted to make sure you were aware of that because if you do look at this when it's finalized, it will look different. And I believe that's it. You've heard enough of me talking about it now. So I'll stand for any questions that anybody has.
Commissioners, please direct any questions you have to Ryan. At the end of that portion, if there are no questions, I would entertain a motion to recommend approval with the changes as highlighted today for the docket packet. Hearing no questions, then I would entertain a motion for the recommendation for approval of the docket.
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion to, this is Joe Phil, I'll make the motion to approve the docket, move it out to the Scott County for approval.
Is there a second to the motion?
This is Commissioner Casilius. I'll second that motion.
Thank you. We will now take a roll call vote.
Thank you. Commissioner Pint,
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius,
Aye.
Commissioner Bierling,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
and Commissioner Thill.
Aye.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Ryan. Excellent job with that docket. Next item on the agenda will be the Sean O'Malley Stream Bank Protection Tax Application. Ryan, you want to address that?
Mr. Chair, yes, certainly. Thank you. So this is a stream bank protection project, and it is for a resident named Sean O'Malley who lives in the city of Savage along the Credit River. Probably one of the more notable things about this project is the total estimated cost of the project is $10,030. However, only $1,813, which is 18%, far less than what they can get from the docket, would come from the WMO that's being proposed. In this instance, the landowner is contributing most of the funds towards the project with an estimated amount of $8,217. The funding source which we would use for this project is through Bowser, which does have the available balance to cover the cost. And partly why this amount is so low is that is all we have remaining in this Bowser grant that is specific for shoreline or stream bank projects. So normally a landowner can apply for 50 to 75% of the cost for a project like this. However, with our funding shortage and the only available funds that we had to go towards it was this grant, which was very specific in only a few practices, that this was really the only opportunity this landowner had for moving forward. And that was enough for them to pursue it. So the project consists of almost an 80-foot section of the Credit River that's migrated outside of its floodplain. So in the instance of a stream, naturally meanders and has erosion, but once it starts to meander outside of its floodplain, then that's where you get accelerated erosion and excessive sediment and phosphorus loss, which is the case here. If it was within the floodplain, that's natural and not something that we would necessarily look at cost sharing unless there was some sort of extenuating circumstance. And with the stream bank project, that deposition goes directly into the Credit River. The proposed protection includes the use of riprap along the bank, so that's to help stabilize the toe, and then also pulling that bank back at a 2.5 to 1 slope. So if you notice in the picture, and I'll go to that here now, you can see the bank is virtually vertical. And so they're going to pull that back at a 2.5 to 1 slope, which, to give you an idea, is you wouldn't want to be riding on a lawnmower on going across a slope like that. It's still fairly steep, but certainly not vertical. And then, everything will be seeded and blanketed when they're all done as well. And the reason this is in front of you today is that all stream bank stabilization projects require a review, and the Scott SWCD screening committee did review this application at their November 17th board meeting and did recommend approval. With that, I'll stand for any questions about the project.
Any questions for Ryan? If not, I would entertain a motion to recommend the approval of the Sean O'Malley Stream Bank Protection application.
This is Commissioner Casilius. I do have just one quick question. So when we're saying there was only $1,813 left, was that of 2020 money?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Casilius, so it is not only of 2020, it's a great question. So that grant is the watershed-based funding, and it goes through, and maybe Melissa or Vanessa can interject here, but it's, I believe, a 2-year period.
It's a 2-year, so it's the same grant Melissa was talking about previously with the chloride management practices. You technically have until 2023 to close everything out, but it is a 2-year biennial grant. So the next funding cycle is the one that I was actually talking about previously, which we received a few of the projects to move forward with. So it is a 2-year grant.
Okay, good. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, good question.
And so with that, why we're pursuing this is we originally had 20,000, I believe, in the watershed-based funding grant for these projects, and we've kind of dwindled those funds down to this. This is a fairly small amount, and so the worry is, would we be able to move it, for another project? And so this one seems to be quite good, especially with what the landowner is proposing to contribute. It goes to show the motivation here on their end to want to get the project done.
If there's no further questions, then I would entertain a motion to recommend the approval.
This is Commissioner Casilius. I motion to approve.
Second,
Sterling, I'd second that.
okay, call for the roll call vote.
Absolutely. Commissioner Pint,
Aye.
Commissioner Casilius,
Aye.
Commissioner Veerling,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
and Commissioner Thill.
Aye.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, then the final item, I have 511 right now, and if there is no other issues, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
This is Commissioner Casilius. I motion to adjourn.
The second,
Commissioner Beerling, I'll second that.
And I'll do the last roll. Commissioner Pint,
aye.
Commissioner Casilius,
Aye.
Commissioner Veerling,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Aye.
and Commissioner Thill. Thank you.
Aye.
All right. You, everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We are very thankful for all of you. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, and stay safe out there.
And are we meeting in December?
At the moment, we don't have any action